Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Insider. Today we have a very special guest, and I'll let her introduce herself in a second. But what I would like to do first is just say that this is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and the topics that we're going to be covering today may be very triggering for individuals. So I definitely want individuals to take a deep breath. And, we're going to be talking about victimization from someone that has been a victim, who I see as a survivor, as many of us are. And so if you've been following us on Title IX Insider and you like what we're doing, ensure to like us and subscribe to us. And we're going to go ahead and just jump in. And so, Heather, feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Heather Wendel. I am a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. I am a sexual assault and domestic violence advocate, and I am trying to do as much as I can to help my fellow survivors in healing and in rebuilding their lives after a horrible experience happened to them. I am a Philly girl. Go Birds. We are Super Bowl champs, so just letting everyone know. I grew up in a deeply religious family and community, and the majority of my young life was spent in church, in youth group, um, church events of all sorts. I was very involved. That is kind of where the story begins.
To share with everyone, Heather and I, we've known each other now for 4 years or so. And the reason that we met is because of her case. I was the Title IX expert and consultant on the case that she had, that resulted in a lawsuit and resulted in a whole bunch of things happening, which we're not going to spend time discussing in detail today. However, the reason that I've invited Heather is because she truly is such a wonderful light and energy that I want individuals to understand and know that Sexual Assault Awareness Month is about individuals just like Heather. And sometimes people don't know anyone or they don't believe they know anyone because trust me, I'm sure everybody does know somebody. Um, but people believe that they don't know somebody. And sometimes they wonder, who is a survivor? Who is a victim? And so this is why I've invited Heather here, because I want her to go ahead and hold her head up high and be a face that individuals can see and begin to understand that victims are real people, real feelings, real trauma. And when we say they have survived, they truly have survived. When we say that they are thriving, they truly are thriving through that survival. And it's important to recognize and see it. And so, Heather, I think one of my first questions I want to chat with you about today is men and boys. You know, I know that one of our upcoming episodes I'll be doing with Nandini going over the program Adolescence. I know everyone's been buzzing about it. I don't know if you've seen it. But the whole premise is that the problem with all forms of sexual violence really stems and starts with boys, and the mentality, what they're raised to think, and the fact that sometimes they don't have coping mechanisms or individuals to talk to. And so just kind of curious what you think. What are your thoughts on boys and men, and especially when we think about statistics? I know I'm always throwing around that over 90% of the time perpetrators are male. I mean, what do you think about that?
Think a lot about that. That is mm, the the issue of men. The biggest issue that I've seen is I feel like it stems from how they are raised and the environment in which they're brought up in. Um, there are some men who grow up in a very patriarchal family, and they see the men as the head of the household, and they are the leader of the family. And I have seen an issue even in relationships that I've had where the mom kind of just lets the kid do whatever they want, and then they grow up into an adult that just does whatever they want. And the lack of accountability is absolutely insane. Um, and also, when we're growing up, we as girls are told, and we as, women are told that the boys are just being mean to you because they like you. And that's not the case. They're being mean because they're just mean. And some kids are just mean. Um, and that continues on. It also doesn't help that, in the current political climate that we're in and who we currently have occupying the White House, that doesn't really help to set a good example for what masculinity really should be and what it can be. It shows that as a society, people are willing to look past that, for whatever reasons they decide. People are entitled to their wrong opinions. um, so I believe that we as a society have looked past, um, the violence that happens to women. And now that we're finally standing up and saying something, there's so much pushback, and you constantly hear, well, not all men, not all men, not all men. And it's like, well, no, but like you said, 90% of the perpetrators are men. So clearly it is a male issue. Um, I feel like there is also, now that women are becoming more independent, we're allowed to do things like have a credit card or a job. Like, woo, big moves for us. And now that we're gaining more independence, it feels like they are clawing at every ability for us to have that independence. Um, and I always like to say, women, we don't need men, but men need women. Um, I feel as though women are able to thrive on their own without a man, and we are resourceful and we're smart and we're capable. And I think it shows a weakness in men that want to claw that back from us. The other thing that I feel in regard to men when it comes to, sexual violence is more men need to feel comfortable speaking up when they hear something that's wrong, when they hear somebody make a joke about sexual assault, any kind of domestic violence, rape, anything like that. Um, it makes my skin crawl when somebody makes a joke about it. And it's it's really difficult to look past it when somebody does make that kind of a joke. Um, so yeah, we definitely have an issue with men in this world. And it's not just here in the United States, it's everywhere. We see even in the case that happened in France recently, where a woman was assaulted dozens of times, if not more, by so many perpetrators, and that was being done to her by her husband. And I think that that shows a global issue with masculinity and with men. And I think men just need to feel, men that are in that not all men group who really are not perpetrating this kind of violence against women, I think they need to feel more comfortable standing up and saying something. And you might lose a friendship over it. And that's something that happens. If you lose a friendship over calling somebody out about sexual violence or joking about sexual violence, then it's probably not the kind of person that you want to be with. Kind of probably not the kind of person that you want to be associating yourself with or um, surrounding yourself with. You are the average of the people that you surround yourself with. And you start to gain the things that they do, whether it be joking or misogyny or so be it. Um, More men need to feel more comfortable standing up and saying, like, that's not cool. Like, that's really not cool. And why would you say something like that? Yeah, because even as a young girl, I experienced violence from men. And I remember one day walking home from school and this guy grabbed me. He was a classmate of mine. And he grabbed me and screamed at me, and like my wrists were all bruised up afterwards. And I was in third grade. And already at that point, as a, an 8, 9 year old kid, already experienced violence from men, which is just unacceptable. And I am really glad at how my parents handled it. And they took action swiftly. And I will always thank them for that because I feel like that set a really good example for me to understand that this is not right. This is not right. This is not how things are supposed to go. And this is not okay and it's unacceptable. So I feel like more people need to be comfortable with teaching their children about what can happen so that they can help to prevent it from happening in the future. I know if I ever have kids, my if I have a son, he will be sitting down and hearing an entire lesson about consent, and it will happen over and over and over again, because I won't have it. Not in my house.
It's interesting what you're saying because, just like in that program, Adolescence, in that Netflix series, you talk about this boy that grabbed you, by the wrist, and what does that mean for that child as he's growing up if that's not being corrected, right? There's no accountability, as you mentioned earlier. There is no reframing the mindset to understand that that is not okay if a parent does not step in.
Mhm.
Um, so if that I wonder if that child was ever spoken to at all. Um, I think about a situation with my ex-husband that I'll share. I rarely share personal details, but I just kept thinking about this right now. And as you were talking, we were at a bar one time, and there was other people with us. And all of a sudden, this gentleman wanted to hang out with, the cool group. Let's just say we're the cool group there. And this gentleman approached, joined our table. All the guys, I was the only female. All the guys were like, cool, drinking, having a good time. And the waitress came over, was asking everybody for their order. She was really sweet, nice and friendly. And this gentleman that joined our party started groping her right in front of me. Now, you can imagine, Heather, you know me, um, I didn't stay quiet. And I literally grabbed the guy's hand and I threw it. Um, and I'll tell you this, I looked at her and I said, you do not need to allow him to touch you. You know, she was like, it's okay. Like he was like touching her hair, touching her body. And she's just kind of like, squirming, trying to be polite, trying to take the order. And I literally was like, no way, and I looked at this and he was an older gentleman, so we can only imagine all the other things he's done, especially behind closed doors to
Mhm.
individuals, because there was no consent to touch this female that way.
Mhm.
And she must have been early 20s or so. Um, and my point to sharing this is the reaction and response of those that I was with, because it was all guys. They looked at me like I was crazy. The negative responses that I got for my reaction led not only to me and my ex-husband fighting and arguing like dramatically, but also for the other guys that were there with us to say that I was crazy, that I shouldn't have done that, and that, there was nothing was going on, nothing was wrong, and that I was exaggerating the entire situation. I was livid. I mean, livid. Um, and so many other examples like that that I have, but it is something, to say that first off, ex-husband, right? And but at that time, it's so eye-opening when you see it right happening right in front of you. You see all these guys and no one is saying a thing. It is completely normalized. And that is so concerning. Um, And so, thank you for sharing, for what you're saying. And, for those of you listening and watching, at the end of this recording, we're going to share a speech that Heather made regarding, her assault and, what she's been through. Um, and as we are just having this conversation together, we're just going to be having this real raw conversation because these topics really do hit home. And I'm sure there's so many of you out there that have seen and witnessed and also stepped in, so please add them to the comments. I would love to see them, because we will definitely respond. It's a troubled topic that needs a lot of attention. So I'm going to move on to another topic now, which is a little bit more positive. It's support. Um, in your speech, which is lovely, I I really noted how you talked about the support you really had and felt mostly was from other survivors. And so I would love to hear a little bit about that, especially for someone out there that might need that connection with someone. They feel alone. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Did you connect with a group? How did you go about that? I know that there are organizations like Callisto that exist out there that are looking for perpetrators that have perpetrated on multiple females, because statistically, if they've perpetrated once, they've perpetrated more than that. So they would have multiple victims. So I know Callisto looks to see where there are connections there. But would love to hear a little bit about that, Heather, and what kind of support you've found out there and what kind of support can others look for?
Yeah, I think that is one of the, because I can't really say that like, oh, I gained so many amazing things from this happening to me, but one of the things that I did gain was a community of survivors. And there's just something different about talking to somebody who's been in the same shoes as you, laced them up and ran the race. And having a community of survivors kept me alive and kept me going and kept me moving forward. And I'm grateful that I have such an incredible group of women that I am lucky to say are my friends and my sisters. And there's been a lot of there's been a lot of lack in support um, from other people, whether it be family members who are like, I don't want to get involved, or um, friends or partners that you tell your story to and they run the other way. And that has happened to me. Um, but the balance that, not the balance, but like the survivors and the relationships that I have with them well exceed um the pain from the lack of support from other people that you would expect to be right there for you, ready to go. Um, there are, like you had mentioned, Callisto, they're a wonderful organization. I was had wonderful conversations with them and about their mission and what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And it's really important because, for example, my perpetrators, I was not their only victim. And I wish that there had been something like Callisto back then that I could have used as a resource. Um, but I've also found I get a lot of joy out of helping other people out. It could be anything, it could be anything stupid and little and like, hey, can you help me organize my spice drawer? And I'm like, absolutely, hell yeah, I'm in. I love organizing. But I like helping people in general. So getting to tell my story and potentially help other people in the process and expand that community of survivors that we have, um, is really a majorly important part of the healing process. And just knowing that you're not alone, knowing that there are people out there that want to help, that want to just absolutely pour love into you and into, fill up your cup. It's one of the most important things that you can have as a survivor. And it is a crucial pillar of my life now. And I really believe that they keep me going every single day. And we have like a little group chat, our little flock. And so getting to have that support and just reach out to the group and say, I'm really struggling today with ABC. Um, does anyone have any free time to talk? They are always willing and able to jump on a call, talk, and just let you vent. And they can go, I understand. And having somebody that understands what you went through, it's like, let's say I had, uh, let's say I had lupus. A lot of people aren't going to understand that. A lot of people that don't have lupus aren't going to understand that. Um, and because of that, in a lot of other environments, because of them not understanding, you don't get the support that you need. And you might get the opposite, actually, and get pushed into an uncomfortable situation where you're like, this is just not right. Um, but having those survivors and having somebody just to talk to and say that, I'm struggling with this. What do you do that helps you? Um, it's so incredibly important to have. And I love my little flock. They're the greatest. Um, and I early on, right after my assault, um, I had actually met somebody else who also went through a similar situation. And that was the first experience that I had in building a community with somebody else who was a survivor. She helped us to form that bond, and she helped me really start my community of survivors. And there was a long time after everything had happened to me that I didn't really have much of a community in survivors because I didn't even want to talk about what had happened to me or admit what had happened to me. Um, and it's also a very uncomfortable conversation to have. So if somebody hasn't been through that and you're like, well, let me tell you all about my nightmares, um, a lot of people tend to run away, because it is an uncomfortable conversation, but it's an important conversation to have because it's happening so rapidly. And we need to do something to mitigate it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I'm blessed to know that you do have that group, and it's a positive thing, that occurred, especially after the rape, that you had, you know, let's call it what it is. Um, I think I always struggle with the fact that people want to say sexual misconduct,
Mhm.
or sexual assault. Is it consensual, non-consensual, penetration, not penetration? There's so many categories. But when we have an actual rape case, I believe it should be called rape. Um, so that way there is no confusion, because I think society also confuses the seriousness of sexual violence
Mhm.
um, in so many ways. But I think I'm thinking about, individuals that when they get into these dark spaces in their minds, how do they pull themselves out? I know that you have had suicidal ideation. And if you're comfortable, I'd love to just maybe hear you talk a little bit to, like, how did you dig yourself out? Because I know that feeling isolated and alone and not having the family or friends support is devastating. Um, and thank God for the support of others that have survived things, and the new friendships made along the way that do understand. But it doesn't take away from the pain that family is not there, that family did not support or believe. Um, and so what what can we say to someone that is in a dark place right now and feels like maybe there is no hope?
I would say I always like to compare it to, I'm big on metaphors and analogies. Um, I like to say that those dark times, it kind of feels like you're in a really dark forest and there's no light, there's no map, at least when you start out, there's no map. You have no idea where you're going. There's scary things around every tree, and it feels all consuming. Um, I did in 2014 attempt to take my life, and I regret that every single day, um, because it put a different level of unnecessary pain on myself, on my family, um, and it felt like this shameful secret that I kept even from my best friend that I've known since I was 13 years old. And she does know now. Um, but I think the best way to get out of that dark forest is to just start walking and to just take one step at a time. And eventually you'll meet somebody along the way who does have a map and a flashlight, and they can help you get out of those difficult times and they can help you get out of those hard times. um, though I did have uh, though I did have not the best support in the beginning, I will say, because some of it I didn't even know what I needed. I didn't know what my options were. Um, and because of that, I couldn't really communicate that to the people in my life. So if I didn't even know what I needed, I couldn't really expect them to know what I needed. And my parents and my siblings supported me in the best way that they knew how and the best way that I knew how at the time. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so grateful for them just kind of diving in and being like, I don't know this forest either, but let's see if we can get out of it together. Um, and I got very lucky that I had a wonderful friend who literally saved my life. Um, um, he was a friend of mine from college, and we were on the crew team together. And we formed a wonderful bond and friendship. And he, to this day, is still an absolutely incredible friend and has been so supportive through my entire journey. Um, and I got lucky that he called 911 that day. I regret that decision every single day of my life, and I would never want to go back to that. Um, though that thought is always kind of in the back of your head a little bit. And because of the experience that I had, it's always kind of in the back of my head a little bit. But every single day, I choose to be here, and I choose to stay alive so that I can thrive and hopefully help somebody else out and be the person with the flashlight and the map if I can be. And
Can you talk a little bit about the support I gave at
yes,
me?
the support you gave, dear Lord, it was like made of steel. Um, when we first had met and talked, um, I immediately knew that you were going to be somebody that I was going to be close with. And when we finally met in person, um, like, don't want to cry. Um, when we finally met in person,
Which was was it 3 years ago now? 2 years ago now?
yeah, it's been 3 years
So crazy. It's
now.
crazy. Yeah. 3 years ago we met in person.
Yes. And you were the person holding my hand while I had to tell the most excruciating experience of my life over again for the millionth time. And I still, like, I can still feel the hug you gave me when we left that room. Um, like my mascara isn't waterproof. Um, bad choice for today. Um, I I never thought that I could get that support from somebody who I just met. And I never thought that I could feel that close to somebody that I just met. And I don't know if you'll ever really know exactly. Now I got you crying. Um, I don't know if you'll ever know exactly how much of an impact that you made and continue to make to this day, in my life. And I just hope that more people are able to get that support, from you and Title IX Consulting Group, and what you were able to do and how you were able to help us and continually fight for us, um, even after your job was technically done.
Your case and the case of so many others that it involved, changed my life forever. I, again, will talk a little personally. My marriage was lost, because there was emotional abuse, where there was blame that for mental health choices that the individual made, um, blamed the fact that I was so focused and supporting all of you. Like I've said, in other recordings, when I talk about even investigations and having that human side to an individual, because you should be making those relationships with people. It's not a job anymore when you're dealing with real humans that have been hurt and have been the target of pain. Um, I don't know how individuals can do the work of any civil rights compliance or Title IX being stone cold and not having the ability to help and give that hug, you know. And I've said it once and I'll always say it, you and others have said that I helped change you guys and help support you guys, but you all changed me so much. Yeah.
It wasn't even just us that you helped out at that time, because I remember the one night we were there and my mom was asking you a million questions, and I know she can talk a lot. I get that from her too. So um but she was able to help her students out because of stuff that she learned from you. Just being there and talking with you allowed her to also help her students out and allowed her to get her students resources that they needed. Um, so it really has a snowball effect on, you think that you're helping, you might have thought like, okay, I'm going into this job and it's, going to do my best job, and we end up all changing each other's lives and creating this bond that none of us ever expected to happen. Um, but a bond that we are all so happy to have and so grateful to have. Um, I mean, my mom still talks about how much you were able to help her, and it's been 3 years, and she still talks about it.
It was a very powerful, high energy time when we were going through the phase that we were going through with that matter. Um, and it's something I say to individuals, even in some of the recordings I make now, which is, you know, if you need to have that legal support, look for a team that you can trust. Look for a team that you can count on and rely on, because it's going to be your team, and you want to have a team you can really count on. Because when things get tough, I mean, it's going to get tough and it's going to be emotional.
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
definitely emotional, that's for sure. I have not cried that much in a very long time. My hair was falling out. Luckily, I got it all back, but that's just because of my experience as a hairdresser for so long. So luckily I
I
get it
I
back.
never thought I was gonna cry as much as I did. I mean, I truly, being the expert and consultant I was so emotionally exhausted and drained. And it was soulful tears, because we have worked together, for so long and have had a relationship this whole time. Sometimes I see it as a friendship, sometimes I see it as I'm like the mother hen at times. Sometimes it's, you know, professional, and it's just a combination. It's family. Um, it's we have been through something that most in this world and lifetime will not experience. Um, but when I see you, Heather, and I started off by saying this, you have this light and this energy about you, and it's so dynamic and vibrant, um, that it can be difficult as a victim, as a survivor, to have that outgoing persona, because what happens is individuals may look at you, as I know it happens to so many others, and it turns into a victim blaming situation. And it turns into this topic of you're not a perfect victim. You don't fit the mold of a victim because look at you, you're so bright and happy and animated. I mean, I guess individuals are going to be expecting you to be on the ground, unable to walk, speak, eat, right? And so let's talk a little bit about, this perfect victim mentality and the fact that because you may not be a perfect victim, like what happens and the victim blaming behind that.
That's a big one. Um, when I was growing up, I was always a very bubbly kid, um, like annoyingly bubbly. I did get called annoying a lot. Um, but I was a pretty happy kid. I loved dancing and singing, and I still remember one Christmas my parents got a karaoke machine and I was like, I am Celine Dion. My heart will go on. um and I was a very extroverted person. I would love always being out with my friends and hanging out and um literally just doing anything with my friends. Um and I was like a relatively goody goody of a kid too, so I didn't really get into much trouble except for school, but now we know that that was just ADHD. But I never really got into any trouble or anything. And when I had experienced my assault, my friends and family noticed a drastic shift in my personality, in how I was. I was a lot more reserved. I was a lot more quiet. Um, I isolated myself a lot. Um, I was in my room a lot after I came home from school. Um, but eventually I started to heal, and eventually I started to heal. However, the girl that I was beforehand, she's gone. And every day I try to be as positive as possible for her. And I try to, sorry, I try to be the best version of myself as much as I can, even during the really dark times. Um, and I want to get that person back. And I know that it's never going to be exactly the same. But there are so many aspects of my life that bring me so much joy. Um, my niece and my nephews, and they bring me so much joy. And my puppy Piper, which I'm sure I'll get him in the screen a little bit later once he's done napping. Um, and my friends and my family and my chosen family. And I want to stick around for them, and I want to be the best version of myself for them and for my loved ones and for my partner. And I one of the things that I have experienced though is that people see that person and they see that bubbly and they're like, "Oh, you're fine." Um when in reality, I'll never be I'll never be the same. Um, and I can try hard every single day to get those aspects of myself back. And I do. And I try every day. And some days are easier than others, and some days are harder than others. But a lot of times people have seen my personality and they think there's nothing going on with her. She's fine. She's great. Her life is great. Her life is fantastic. Um, but it's kind of like an iceberg. You see this little thing on top and you think that there's not, you think that's it. And that's why the Titanic sunk, because there was a lot of stuff underneath that you couldn't see. And I try to keep a lot of that stuff to myself for the most part, because I am still nervous about putting too much of that weight onto another person, because I know that it is heavy, because it's something that I carry every single day. And still to this day, I have nightmares replaying exactly what happened to me. Even recently, I literally woke up on the day of the Super Bowl, the best day ever. And I woke up having had a nightmare, and it was in the back of my mind the entire day. And I tried as much as possible to get it out of my mind, but I didn't want to tell anybody, um, because it just feels so heavy. So a lot of people don't know a lot of what I've been through, because I don't want to put that weight and that pain on other people. Um, but at the same time, I'm also robbing them of the ability to support me if they do desire to do that. So I think the most important thing, and this is something I'm even learning in my relationship, is transparency about how I'm feeling, what I'm going through, um, the depth of what I'm going through, and the continued support that I need in order to survive and thrive. And I've been able to have some really good conversations with people about it recently. Um, and that has helped me significantly to be able to say, this person knows my story. They know what I've been through. They know what I've had to endure. And they still care about me, love me, are friends with me, are chosen family with me. Um, and I've been able to form deeper bonds with people by being more transparent about what I have gone through, and being more transparent about what I really need to heal. And day by day, I'm getting that girl that I used to be, a little bit back. Um, and I feel like I'm getting more light in my life now than I have in the past. Um, and a lot of that can be attributed to the community that I've been able to build with you, with my flock, so to speak, and with my girls. And because they understand, and they know what's under that iceberg, and they know the pain, and they know how it feels. And so that's been one of the biggest things that has kind of helped me to survive and to get that person back, and to start to be a new version of myself that I'm still learning who she is. Um, but what I do know is that she is strong and determined and wildly resilient and passionate, and I have a renewed energy to help other people out in any possible way that I can. Um, yeah, and really just anything, like I keep I keep pairs of socks in my car just in case I see somebody that doesn't have some, and like, and keep breakfast bars in my car just in case I'm driving past. I live in the Philly area, so um it is something that I see frequently. Well, I shouldn't say frequently, but it is something that I see um in my community. And even if I can help somebody out in that sense, I want to. And doing those actions is helping bring back that joy in my life. And by being able to do anything that I can to help other people, that's bringing back the joy in my life that I haven't had in a long time. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that has helped me despite people not really understanding what I'm going through. I found ways to kind of pivot around it and figure out how to get the support that I need.
As you're talking, I'm listening to you, and the things that are popping in my head are self-care, 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 because it's one of those things where when we are strong and we're building ourselves up to push past the hurt, um, and we want to help others because it helps us identify ourselves as not being weak and reminds us that, we can still do something for somebody else. We sometimes forget about ourselves. And so that self-care aspect kept ringing in my head as I was listening to you. Um, and so I just want to say, don't forget about taking care of yourself, also very important, because I think maybe by not being that perfect victim, you become a hero, which is good, but heroes still have the need to take care of themselves too, not just everybody else.
Yeah, self-care is definitely something that um I've learned to define a little bit better, because for the longest time you think self-care is face masks and massages and going to a spa or going away on a vacation, when in reality sometimes self-care is survival and doing what you need to do to just get through the day, whether that be, what, I need an extra hour of sleep today, or I need to get myself a little treat to make me feel better.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining us for Title IX Insider. I love the fact that we were just, being open and honest and providing some information that maybe individuals just haven't heard before. And so thank you so much. I know that from here, we're going to go ahead and play your speech that you made about what happened to you. And that's how this is going to close for us today. Would you like to add anything before we play that for folks?
So, this speech was for WAR, which is Women Organized Against Rape. It is an organization in Philadelphia, and the amazing Lakeisha Anthony asked me to speak at the Survivors March last year, and it was a wonderful experience. It was also a very scary experience. But I'm so glad that I did it. And I was able to continue on my journey of creating community and my journey of just trying to help as many people as possible. And it was a wonderful experience. I had a lovely videographer that did record it for me, which was nice. But yeah, it was a wildly scary experience to speak publicly like that in front of people. It was my first time speaking like that publicly in front of people. So yeah, it was healing in itself. So here's my speech, and I hope that it can resonate with some people and help some people to feel like they're not alone and to learn how to take their broken wings and learn to fly.
Good morning, Philly, and thank you all for joining us here today to stand up and speak out for our rights and for us to continue to seek justice. I want to extend a massive thank you to Ward and Lakeisha Anthony for having me speak today. I am extremely grateful to be able to share my story with you all. My name is Heather. I am a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. My first year of college, I was unfortunately the victim of a brutal sexual assault by multiple people at a party. I was 18. It was my first ever sexual experience. And I was so ashamed and blamed myself for what was done to me. I told someone who I thought was a friend, and she told me that I probably wanted it. I faced even more pushback and obstacles in reporting what had happened. I was asked why I was at the party, I was asked what I was wearing, and I was asked if I was drinking. I was ostracized and shamed and blamed and told that I would be the one in trouble for what happened. Once I finally got up the nerve to report it, I was harassed for reporting. People in my community called me trash and a whore, and while suffering and being subjected to a misogynistic, hyper-religious, conservative environment where I was even blamed by others for what had happened to me. I constantly felt disassociated. I isolated myself, even at one point staying in my dorm, binge watching Friends and binge eating goldfish. I no longer felt safe anywhere. I felt betrayed, ashamed, and abandoned by those who I believed would keep me safe. For many years, I continued to see myself as a victim, and on more than one occasion, have almost lost my life to this battle. I struggled for many years to be able to communicate my feelings or to even understand them myself. I grappled with keeping community, maintaining friendships and relationships, and that led me to feeling incredibly alone. I ended up in a cycle of toxic and even abusive relationships, and I felt as though I completely lost my identity in the vicious cycle. Being a survivor can be incredibly isolating, and sometimes it feels like nobody understands, or like you are a magnet for toxic people. But just know that you are not alone. Over the last 3 years, I have finally publicly told my story on a grand scale, and I found that that transparency has not only helped me to connect with other survivors, but it helped me to connect back with myself. So much of my life was stolen by what was done to me, but I am taking it all back. I am regaining my identity, and I'm even going back to college. Not online this time. Today, as I stand before you, I still absolutely have many struggles on a daily basis. I am still learning how to communicate certain feelings, how to stand up for myself, and I know that this journey will never end. But I am proud to say that I now call myself a survivor. Over the years, I have had some incredible support systems, community with other survivors, and a wonderful team of medical professionals to help me heal mentally and physically, and some amazing friends and family that stuck by my side through an incredibly difficult and re-traumatizing legal process. They have helped me to regain my identity and learn how to love myself again. Like a kintsugi vase, I am repairing all my broken pieces with gold, and life is becoming more beautiful every day. You are not alone in this fight. And if you are struggling, please know that there is an entire community of sibling survivors who are ready and waiting to welcome you with open arms. This almost 14-year-long fight as a survivor eventually led me to WAR and doing anything I can to help other survivors. WAR's mission is to eliminate all forms of sexual violence in our communities. They provide specialized treatment services, comprehensive prevention education programs, and advocacy for the rights of the victims of sexual assault, abuse, and harassment. WAR works with survivors regardless of when the violence occurred, and the goal is to empower survivors to heal. There is a community here. There is healing here. There is a safe space here. Continue to stand up and speak out. Continue to fight the fight. And most importantly, take these broken wings and learn to fly.